I died in the year I loved him the most. With a fortune of billions, he said he would give it up, and he did. He accompanied me to the death. When I opened my eyes again, I was back 10 years ago. We had just gotten married, and it was the time I disliked him the most. I ran to his company, saw him for the first time, and choked up, saying, "Samuel, I'm sorry." After a brief moment of confusion, his expression turned solemn as he said, "What's it this time? How are you going to torment me?" I remember that when the explosion happened, Samuel didn't come out. He, always neat and tidy, knelt by my side and said, "Minnie, don't be afraid. I'll stay with you." He was 38 that year, with a fortune of billions. He said he would give it up, and he did. He accompanied me to the death. On a hot midsummer evening, the setting sun outside the window looked like blood. The hot wind blew into the room. I woke up from the dream, sitting on the bed staring blankly. The ticking of the clock in the corner echoed. The calendar lay silently on the table. "Madam, Mr. Samuel just called and said he won't be coming back tonight." The maid's voice came from the living room, calm and peaceful. I looked down at the new wedding ring on my ring finger, closed my eyes. I had actually gone back 10 years. The fire that surrounded me before my death, and the warm and firm embrace, felt so real. In the final moments, Samuel was still saying to me, "Minnie, don't be afraid. I've waited too long for you in this life. In the next life, you must come find me early." Was this a dream or reality? I pinched myself, feeling the dull pain in my thigh. The sound of a distant train whistle snapped me out of my confused thoughts. After the shock, a lingering heartache and bitterness followed. A misunderstanding created by someone had made me hate Samuel for many years. During this time, his competitors used all means to suppress him, suffocating him. At home, it was my cold treatment of him that made him not always come back. Samuel's parents had passed away, and he had no close relatives. He guarded a business empire alone for half a lifetime. Eventually, the misunderstanding was resolved. We had a few months of happiness, and we even had a child. But before I could tell him about the pregnancy, I died tragically. "Madam, the flowers have arrived. Are you ready to go?" The maid came in and asked me, "What?" My thoughts were still in a state of confusion. "The flowers. Aren't you going to visit Mr. David?" David, hearing this name suddenly, I was stunned. A light bulb lit in the midst of the confusion. So it was this day. David was my childhood sweetheart. He was also a talented actor. However, a tragedy left him with severe burns all over his body, needing long-term hospitalization. In my previous life on this day, I went to the hospital with a bunch of flowers. I spent David's birthday with him. And as I came out of the hospital, I saw Samuel sitting in the car, the cigarette burning at his fingertips. Oblivious, I didn't want to explain anything. I didn't even want to see him. "Minnie." Samuel noticed me, put out the cigarette, got out of the car, his tone desolate. "Today is my birthday." I stopped in my tracks, turned back to look at him coldly. "So what?" Samuel's dark eyes looked at me without a word. I said, "Today is also David's birthday. You ruined his face and his future to marry me. How do you expect me to treat you?" Samuel opened his mouth, trying to say, "That was just an accident. If you hadn't invited him that day, he wouldn't be lying in the hospital now." "How can you expect me to believe that it was an accident?" Samuel fell silent, and finally said to me, "I'm sorry." From that day on, Samuel's and my relationship took a downhill turn. A long and agonizing Cold War began. Later, I learned that the accident, which even Samuel thought was an accident, was just a conspiracy by some people to sow discord between me and him. "Your things are already in the car. We should leave now before the traffic gets worse." The maid came back to call me. Outside the window, the setting sun was half down, the light dimming. Coming back to my senses, I hurriedly put on my coat and got in the car, because I suddenly realized that it was 10 years ago, and everything could still be changed. The driver merged into the traffic. The road to the hospital was already jammed. Shouldn't we give Mr. David a call and have him wait? Not going to the hospital, I looked at the changing traffic lights outside the window, and changed my mind. Go to the company. In fact, I didn't have much impression of Samuel's company. When I was young, I disliked him, and even later when I loved him, he was being targeted by enemies, and danger surrounded him, so I didn't dare to go find him. So at this moment, standing in front of the towering office buildings, I was a bit lost. Which one was his office building? Passers-by curiously eyed me, holding a huge bouquet of flowers, dressed elegantly, wearing makeup, like a girl preparing for a confession. Feeling uncomfortable, I took out my phone and dialed Samuel's number. He wasn't even an emergency contact. I pressed the call button, expecting a long wait, but after a brief pause, the call was answered. A cold and distant voice came from the other end. "What's up?" Hearing his voice again, my eyes suddenly felt warm, and my voice involuntarily choked up. "Samuel, where's your office?" I couldn't find it. The passersby looked at me even more strangely. A woman who couldn't find her husband's office, standing on the sidewalk, crying loudly. It seemed like Samuel was in a meeting on the other end of the line. He hesitated slightly and said, "Stop by there for today." Then he said to me, "Stand on the sidewalk. I'll come down." A few minutes later, Samuel walked out of the office building. His tall figure cut through the neon lights, dressed in a suit, exuding an air of grace and self-possession. Looking at myself in the mirror, the eyeliner streaked by tears, I resembled the heroine of an orphan's lament. "Why did you come?" His tone was very calm, almost cold. I turned around. The tall, handsome man was looking at me coldly, his pupils reflecting my troubled face, and his expression slightly frozen. Samuel was always impeccable no matter the occasion, like a flower blooming on a cliff, unsullied. "I'm sorry for disturbing you," I said, keeping my head down, not daring to look at him. "Today," he said those two words and didn't continue. I knew what he wanted to say. "Today, I should have celebrated David's birthday with him, instead of being here." It reminded me. I thrust the flowers into his arms and mumbled, "Happy birthday." A long silence followed. I sneakily glanced at him and noticed that he was staring at the bouquet, not looking very pleased. Finally, with a hint of bitter sarcasm, he said, "Minnie, this was unwanted by him, right?" "What?" I realized his mood wasn't right, and suddenly focused on the bouquet. My heart sank. Blue roses, the flower languages, I give you the stars and the ocean. It was David's favorite, the stars and the ocean. My memory was too chaotic when I woke up. My mind was set on finding Samuel, neglecting these details. "I'm sorry," I said. "Thank you for the birthday gift." Samuel's tone was almost stiff. "It's getting late. Let the driver take you home." He turned and started to walk away. Quickly, I grabbed the hem of his back. "Wait." Samuel didn't expect my action. He didn't stop in time, and I stumbled, crashing heavily into his back, leaving colorful smudges on his high-end suit. Samuel turned back, staring at my fingertips, silent for a long time. I realized my mistake, stubbornly said, "Samuel, I'm not going back." His expression turned solemn. "Minnie, how are you going to torment me this time?" It was really hard to answer that question. In my memory, at this time when Samuel and I had just gotten married, I was quarreling with him. I was 23, he was 28. The arguments were almost entirely one-sided, delivered by me. I would say hurtful things, and even when giving him gifts on special occasions, I made sure to twist the knife. I was like a shepherd boy who cried wolf too many times, causing him to stop trusting me. Remembering that once the misunderstanding was resolved in the previous life, my methods were more direct and brutal. I just had to tackle him. This man, despite looking cold, was surprisingly easy to coax. But this method might not work now. Moreover, Samuel had suffered too much torment and injustice, and I wanted to make amends in some way. After much thought, I said, "Let me treat you to dinner." Samuel lowered his eyes, coldly said, "It's not necessary. I have work tonight." "Then let's order takeout." I shamelessly followed him. "I'll order noodles for you." Samuel said nothing, not even acknowledging my presence. He still tightly held onto the bouquet of flowers. As we passed by a trash can, I thought he would immediately throw it away, but he didn't. Following him, we entered his office, empty. The desk had a cold lunchbox lying untouched. He hadn't touched it. Was he planning to confront the past like this tonight? A pang of unexpected heartache hit me, and I opened my phone to order him a bowl of noodles, clear soup, less salt. The side dish should be tomato beef brisket, and a few other sides, all non-spicy. In the past, Samuel used to order heavy dishes to accommodate my taste. It wasn't until later that I learned that he had stomach issues and couldn't eat too spicy, oily, or salty food. After placing the order, I sat on the sofa, unsure of what to say. It seemed like nothing I said would be appropriate. Samuel was unpacking the flower wrapping to put them in a vase. The blue roses stung my eyes. Without thinking, I walked over and snatched them, threw them into the trash can. He paused, looking at the blood beads from his thumb being pricked, sighed wearily. "Minnie, are you done messing around?" Not yet. I suppressed the stifled air in my chest, curious why he was acting like a statue, showing no emotion. "I'll buy you something else since you don't like it." Samuel took out a tissue and pressed it against the wound, his eyes slightly lowered in resignation. "Forget it." Ignoring him, I picked up the trash and left a sentence behind. "Wait here." Then I hastily left the room. On a summer evening, the roadside was filled with flower vendors. However, compared to the fancy bouquets in flower shops that cost hundreds or thousands of dollars, the quality here was lower. I ran around to several stalls, buying all the red roses and tying them into a simple bouquet with basic wrapping paper. Just as the takeout arrived, I carried it up to the building. The 19th floor was even quieter than when I had arrived earlier. The few employees working overtime had already left. Only Samuel's office had a small light on. I tiptoed in, pushing the door open. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window with his back to me, looking desolate. It felt like he was a stray dog abandoned by someone. The heavy bouquet of flowers and the takeout collided with the door with a loud thud. Samuel's back stiffened, and he turned around to see me almost being crushed. "What are you standing there for? Help me with this." He panted. He seemed surprised that I had returned, and after a brief moment of perplexity, he quickly walked over, taking the bouquet and the takeout in one hand and guiding me to the sofa with the other under my armpit, as I caught my breath, sweating from the effort. I still smiled and said, "These are for you. I bought all the roses on the street for you." A moment of blankness appeared on Samuel's handsome face. Apparently, he was not used to my way of treating him now. Did I have to scold him for him to understand? When he was about to go back to his cold meal, I exclaimed. Samuel instantly looked over, and I caught a glimpse of nervousness in his eyes. I leaned back on the sofa, raising my chin impatiently, and said, "Can't you eat something hot? I hate seeing you eat cold food." For the next half an hour, my complaints echoed in the office. "Are you even going to eat? Can't you see the big piece of meat? Don't you eat vegetables? Are you still picky at this age? Are you going to just stare at the noodles I bought for you?" After tirelessly urging him, the steaming bowl of noodles finally disappeared. I was worried that Samuel wouldn't have enough to eat, so I even gave him the osmanthus cake I had brought for myself. I was getting dry-mouthed from talking so much. Suddenly, a glass of water was handed to me. I looked up to see Samuel staring at me, clearing his throat before scolding me. He seemed a bit more relaxed now. Although his eyes still lacked their usual spark, at least the cold, guarded look was gone. I restrained myself from hugging him and said, "Samuel, let's live well from now on." He moved his gaze away, silent, as he cleaned up the bowl and chopsticks, not answering my question directly. "Now, get dressed, and I will have the driver take you home." "But I just got here," I protested. He quickly pushed the door open and headed out, as if fleeing from something. After all, taking out the trash didn't require a big CEO like him. It would be a lie to say I didn't feel disappointed. How come dealing with this man seemed even trickier after being reborn? I sat on the sofa, planning my next move. Should I just pounce on him, or should I pour out my heart before pouncing? A sudden ringing of the phone abruptly interrupted my thoughts. I absent-mindedly answered the call. It was a voice from the distant past, yet familiar. "Minnie, where are you? I've been waiting for you for a long time. Didn't we agree to celebrate our birthdays together?" Upon remembering everything that happened in the past life, I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. "David, we are childhood friends, right?" I asked, trying to clarify. David sensed my unease and corrected me. "Minnie, we are family." I repeated the words, suddenly asking, "Don't you have anything to tell me?" He hesitated for a moment, sighed, and apologized for eating cake without telling me. Why is it that someone who cares about us can lie, make demands, make jokes without restraint, while Samuel must always stand behind and endure everything? I felt a chill run through me, unable to force a smile. "I have something to do today, so I won't be able to come. Happy birthday to you." I hung up the phone, took a deep breath, feeling stifled, thinking back to the phone call David made to me before I was kidnapped, asking where I was. I fell into contemplation. He was the person I trusted the most, but what if? From the beginning, the bomb explosion was the work of someone we knew? Raising my eyes, I saw Samuel standing at the door, his profile hidden in the shadows, his expression unreadable. After hesitating for a long time, I asked, "Did you hear everything?" "I did. Let's go," he replied calmly, with a tinge of restrained emotions in his voice. As the car arrived downstairs, I struggled to explain what would happen in the future, afraid he would think I was crazy. "Samuel." He only slowed his pace slightly. Without looking back, I asked, my voice flying rapidly, "Yesterday I did promise to celebrate your birthday with you, but today I am different. I am from the future." Samuel suddenly stopped, turned around, his eyes filled with a layer of ice. "Enough." He closed his eyes, suppressing his emotions, saying, "Dinner today was delicious, and I'm glad you could celebrate my birthday with me." I stared at him intently, seeing the pain buried deep in his eyes. Samuel's lips were pale, and each word he uttered sounded like a tremor from someone in extreme pain. "So you're going to see David now?" "I understand, because this is the price to pay. In the past life, Samuel once told me that every bit of goodness I gave him would be met with more pain in return, so he never dared to expect anything or prepared for me to leave at any moment." That conversation now felt like a knife stabbing into my heart, stirring up a painful ache. The realization that dawned on me too late overwhelmed me. On this day in the past life, when I was not around, his dinner was just a cold box meal. No one wished him a happy birthday, so he waited for me at the hospital entrance, didn't he? Samuel simply wanted to hear me say, happy birthday, but I made him stay away and leave me alone. The belated truth weighed heavily on me. He looked away. I'm sorry for my outburst. It's not safe at night. You should go to the hospital quickly. I reached out, grabbing Samuel's hand, determinedly inching closer to him. Interlocking our fingers, he stiffened, but didn't pull away. Instead, he asked in a low, hoarse voice, Minnie, what do you want? Do you want to embarrass me further? I raised my head, pulling his tie down. Honey, don't move. These words seemed like a seal that imprisoned him completely. I stood on tiptoe and kissed Samuel's cold lips. The elegant scent of sandalwood was messily scattered as if by a wild gust. I embraced his neck, soothing him carefully as I pushed him against the wall. From initial stiffness to shock, and finally surrendering, he closed his eyes, allowing me to humiliate and torment him. His pristine shirt became crumpled into a mess. Unwittingly, he reached around my waist, gradually tightening his grip until he firmly pressed against my lower back, bringing us intimately close together. The overhead light flickered on and off, and in the end, we separated in the darkness, panting heavily. Minnie, Samuel's voice was low and strained. Don't do this. Don't you like it? Not. He fell silent for a long time before saying, don't tempt me. Go find him while I still have some sense left. Would you? I teased him lightly in his ear, feeling wronged. Aren't you jealous? Aren't you angry? Don't you mind me kissing someone else? Samuel seemed provoked, suddenly lowering his head to silence my words with a kiss, taking me in his arms and laying me back on the sofa. Without waiting for my response, his large hand caressed the back of my head, venting his anger by kissing me again. My lips twitched, realizing I needed to up the ante as he seemed quite resilient. But the unfolding events were going beyond my control. Samuel. I suddenly became wary. What are you doing? My intention was to go home. He spoke warmly. I gave you a chance to leave, but you didn't, and now, the opportunity is gone. With that, I was lifted off my feet and laid over the back of the sofa. A masculine voice softly whispered in my ear, seductive and alluring, Minnie, you're in for it now. I had thought that given Samuel's character, he wouldn't go too far, but I forgot that in the past life, he was a man willing to sacrifice for love. There was a hint of barbarity buried deep within him. I weakly begged for mercy, my plea muffled between our lips, until I could only weakly cling to his neck, calling out, Samuel, please be gentle with me. Samuel suddenly stiffened, carefully stopping. I'm sorry. I rested my chin on his shoulder, looking up to see the bright moonlight outside the window. Samuel, I've already thought of names for our child. I had thought about it for a long time in the past life, but never told him. Minnie, please don't say it. His voice husky and soft. You don't believe it? The response to my words was an endless silence. He dared not hope that we could have a child together. I've decided on a boy and a girl, and I'll leave their nicknames to you. Little did I know that the person who had just regained his sanity would slip back into the web of losing control. Samuel didn't give me a chance to speak again, but carried me into a small door on the side of the office. The door gently closed. The wind lingered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The moonlight was bright. Just a door away, there were murmurs in the dark. In the late night, I got irritated and kicked him, saying I didn't want him. Samuel just silently dragged me back and asked, if not me, then who do you want? He asked earnestly. I blushed and said, just not you. He lowered his head. Your words don't count. That night, my dreams were filled with Samuel's entanglement and a sky full of fire. I was lying in a pool of blood, with explosives strapped to my body. Samuel rushed into the fiery scene, picked me up, trembling all over. I saw him crying as I weakly raised my hand to push him away. Get away from me. Don't touch me, please. The dream shattered with cries. The warm touch dissipated instantly. I fell back into darkness, and abruptly woke up, my cheeks damp with tears. It was just a dream. Coming to my senses, I realized that Samuel had been pushed to the edge of the bed by me. From his expression, it seemed like I had been talking in my sleep. He handed me a tissue but remained seated at a distance, avoiding my touch. My heart sank. He still misunderstood. Samuel, I tried to speak. I just had a dream earlier. He listened intently as I brought a trembling voice. I was in a fire with explosives strapped to me, and I asked you to join me in death, so please don't misunderstand the things I said. Samuel's eyes briefly lit up as if understanding something and then returned to silence. Okay, I believe you, he said, tucked me in with the blanket, picked up a pillow, and started to walk out. Samuel. I called out after him, you're lying. He didn't say anything. I snatched the pillow and fiercely hit his back. All right. You can go. My whole body is sore. You two-faced jerk. Just leave me here to fend for myself. I didn't look at him, turned my back, curled up into a ball under the covers. No wonder they say young people are stubborn. The 10-year younger Samuel was so stubborn, not adorable at all. After a moment of silence, the bed sank behind me, and Samuel sighed. "Go to sleep, let's cuddle." He obediently pulled me closer, wrapping me in his arms. The night was still long, but I lay awake, staring into the endless darkness. Devoid of sleep, since my rebirth, too much information had been swirling in my mind. The person who kidnapped me had a connection with Samuel, a boss from a bankrupt company. The accident that happened to David was part of my uncle's scheme to drive a wedge between me and Samuel. These were the things I knew in my last year in the past life. My whereabouts had always been well protected by Samuel, but how did the kidnappers find me on the way to the hospital for a checkup? The only possibility was the phone call from David. Even in his last moments, Samuel had thanked David, saying, "Without him, I wouldn't have found you." Looking back now, how did my most trusted childhood friend, David, play a part in all of this? Due to the sleepless night, the next morning I felt like my head was exploding. "Samuel, I can't get up." "What kind of person are you?" He nudged me a few times and said helplessly, "Get up and have breakfast." "I won't eat. You're too principled," I grumbled. "You don't like your younger self at all." He paused for a moment and asked kindly, "My younger self?" "Yeah." I grumpily yanked the blanket out of his hands to wrap myself in it. "I like the 10 years older you. Why don't you just age and stop bothering my sleep?" Shifting to the coziest spot, I stretched out comfortably, feeling Samuel's scent all over my body. I drifted back to sleep until the afternoon. Apparently, he thought I might wake up hungry, so he neatly laid out lunch on the table. The room was extremely clean, everything in order, but my bed, a separate realm within this order, was a mess, due to my antics last night. The sheets were torn and tangled, ending up on Samuel. 28-year-old Samuel was so innocent compared to 38-year-old Samuel. I shook my head, clearing away the blush-inducing images from my mind. After a quick wash-up, I ate breakfast, wrapped myself in Samuel's shirt, and peeked out the door. The office was quiet, the computer screen displaying a video conference. The setting sun cast a soft halo through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Samuel in his suit and leather shoes. It beautifully softened his inherent aloofness. My heart fluttered, and my cheeks turned red. Samuel's insight was always sharp, and he glanced up the moment I opened the door. Seeing my attire, he suddenly froze. I coughed slightly, feeling a bit uncomfortable, before walking out with a red face and sitting across from Samuel. I checked my phone and found 5 missed calls and several messages from David, all in the late hours of the night. I should have been in a daze at that time, unmoved by the ringing. Could it be? I stared at Samuel in contemplation. He remained focused, seemingly unaware of my presence. I crossed my legs, swinging them around in his peripheral vision, not caring if I might be a bit exposed. Samuel's voice faltered suddenly as he took a brief pause. "That's it for today," he said, ending the meeting. He leaned back in his chair, furrowing his brows. "Minnie, from calling me honey last night, it was now Minnie?" Look at that facade of righteousness and refusal to admit anything. One would think he was a completely serious person, wouldn't anyone? I scooted closer to him, sitting on a small stool in front of him, my expression serious. "I think it's time to tell you," I said, putting down his chopsticks. He adopted a posture of listening attentively. "Go on." With a deep sense of vengeance, I spoke up. "Actually, I've undergone rebirth too." Silence, a long silence. Samuel raised an eyebrow ever so slightly. Lips pursed tightly, he seemed like he wanted to laugh. I pointed at him. "So, you don't believe me after all?" "Go on, Minnie," he encouraged. I took a determined breath and recounted all the past events. Initially, he listened as if to a child's story, thinking it was a new trick of mine. Slowly, he started to furrow his brows. "I knew I was right. That person who stabbed me should be an employee of your company," and later went out on his own. Of course, that was 10 years ago. I don't know where he is now. Also, my uncle was involved. And that's something to keep in mind. Before I could finish my sentence, a sudden and piercing ring interrupted us. Samuel and I both saw the name displayed on the phone screen, David. Samuel's expression changed. Returning to his cold demeanor, he stood up, picked up the plate, and I went to wash the dishes. That feeling came back. It was avoidance. He was still afraid. I gritted my teeth, grabbed the phone, and followed him to the kitchen. He had his back to the door. Turning on the tap, I pressed the speakerphone button. David's familiar voice came through the speaker. "Minnie, this might be the last time I call you." Besides voices, there was the sound of whistling wind. I immediately tensed up. "Where are you?" "On the rooftop of the high school building." His voice was soft. "Minnie, do you remember? The day my parents left me, you said, the Smiths were not sincere to you either. We can be a family in the future. When I was 18, I wanted to jump off the rooftop, and it was you who stopped me." His voice was soft, tinged with some regret. "But now, if you don't want me, I feel like there's no point in living." "David, don't be impulsive." My head buzzed, turning around to grab some clothes, putting them on. "Wait for me." I'll be right there. After hanging up the phone, I turned around to find Samuel still with his back towards me, standing by the sink. It seemed like he hadn't heard anything, just the sound of water flowing. I rushed in. Are you crazy? Why aren't you changing clothes? I pulled him abruptly, and his dark eyes stared at me. Change clothes? It's not appropriate for me to go myself. I'm already married. I impatiently took out my phone, speaking quickly. Samuel. I'll give you 10 seconds to take off the apron. I'll call the police. He's gone mad. The kids haven't finished evening self-study. What if he jumps in front of everyone? Changed. Samuel was already standing cleanly at the door. I was taken aback. You changed quickly. Thankfully, Samuel could drive, saving us the trouble of waiting for a driver. The police had arrived at the scene and advised me not to communicate with David anymore. There was a glimmer of hope. He might not do anything dangerous for the time being, and during this time, we managed to evacuate the students from the school. Samuel drove us quickly to the scene. The wind was strong on the rooftop. It couldn't dispel the summer heat. The campus was silent, and the police kept their distance about 5 meters away from David. The police dragged me to the rooftop. He insists on seeing you. Detain him for a while until the rescue team arrives. I glanced at Samuel, who was held back beyond the cordon. He nodded at me. I took a deep breath, climbed up the stairs, and called out, David. The figure sitting at the edge of the rooftop turned his head. His burnt profile was revealed. Minnie, you're here. Looking at him, I felt a moment of confusion. I hadn't seen him in a long time. In the past lives, after clearing up misunderstandings with Samuel, we had seen him a few times, and David had been resistant. Probably as a person who had harbored hatred for many years, suddenly discovering that the real culprit wasn't him. It was difficult to let go of that resentment, and later, with Samuel facing threats. Tensions rising, I stayed at home, afraid to go out. After these past years, it must have been over a year since we last met. David, please come down. David ignored me, just looking at me. I'm sorry. His gaze shifted toward Samuel waiting outside the crowd and said, You're right, I was too extreme. You had told me before we got married that we'd only be family from now on. I was too greedy. I remembered the days when David and I supported each other, got through tough times together. When I was being bullied by troublemakers, he protected me and took the blows for me. When my uncle kicked me out, he came to me in the pouring rain, brought an umbrella, and took me back home. For a moment, I began to waver. Had he really been my uncle's killer? David smiled. You promised to celebrate my birthday with me every year. Sing a birthday song and I'll come down. All right, I'll sing. The wind gradually died down as the birthday song floated through the night on the rooftop, but as I sang that song, I realized that I hadn't sung it for Samuel that day. I made a mental note to make it up to him later. As the song ended, David stood up on the rooftop, facing me. Thank you. It's been a long time since I heard you sing. It was beautiful. I have one more question for you. His voice was soft. Ask. I remained silent for a long time, then finally said, You're my family, from the moment he stood on the stage. That was it. David's deep eyes scanned the crowd, seemingly locking eyes with Samuel. The wind on the rooftop made me shiver, and I said, Let's go back, okay? David retracted his gaze, gave me a slight smile. Minnie, I love you. With that, he opened his arms, stepped back, and fell into the endless darkness of the night. At that moment, time seemed to stand still. My blood froze, but the next moment, I lunged towards the rooftop. David. Only to find him gone. The pitch-black ground below looked like the gaping mouth of a beast. David had disappeared into the depths. I stared blankly at the dark ground. My mind went blank. There was a dull thud, and my legs gave way, kneeling on the ground. David, is he really dead? Did I wrongly accuse him? They say people are sensitive. Having known him for so many years, had David sensed my estrangement from him and chosen to end his own life? Did this mean that I had caused his death? My body was cold, sitting there numbly, shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, I fell into a warm embrace. The familiar scent was like a lifeline at that moment. I held onto Samuel's sleeve tightly, saying, I caused his death. He held me. You're here. Don't be afraid. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I cried out, holding on to Samuel, apologizing incoherently. I'm sorry. He ran his fingers through my hair, comforting me. He's not dead. Don't cry, he whispered gently in my ear. The police have set up an air mattress below. They cut him. I closed my eyes, tears soaking his shirt, and the next moment, I burst into tears. When someone dies because of your actions, self-blame can be like a mountain that crushes you. Samuel's voice was strained. It's just a few scrapes. He's been taken to the hospital. If you want, we can go. No, my voice was hoarse. I want to stay with you. Okay. We returned to the car, outside. The police were gradually withdrawing in waves. Someone would soon take us to the hospital. Because David had no relatives, I leaned against Samuel's shoulder, utterly exhausted. Before we left, there was one last thing I hadn't told him. I suspect David was also involved. Samuel took a deep breath. Minnie, what if he wasn't? If he was innocent, would you choose him or me? As he asked that question, I felt a sense of relief. I always felt that Samuel considered himself the one who wouldn't be chosen, but the Minnie of 10 years later would always firmly choose Samuel without hesitation. I looked up, staring at Samuel seriously. Do you remember when David first started out? Yeah, we didn't know each other then. By the time he started his career, became famous for his acting, we should have already broken up for over a year when I married you. I admit, at first, I really disliked you, just like I disliked my uncle, for intruding into my life without permission, and coincidentally, David had an accident on his way to dinner with investors. The driver was one of your men. I saw you as cruel and manipulative, just like my uncle back then. It wasn't because I liked David that I didn't like you. I didn't like David. I just couldn't stand someone who would ruin others' futures at the drop of a hat. Samuel gently held my hand and apologized. It was indeed my fault. I didn't think it through. No. I held onto his arm. I told you. It was my uncle's fault, so you're not to blame. If anyone dares to scold you, I'll argue with them. He fell silent for a moment, then said, "Thank you." Thank you for what? For the first time, someone stood up for me. It was standing up for me. At his words, I began to feel guilty again. Samuel's family was rarely mentioned in the industry. Indeed, there weren't many people who stood up for him. Samuel looked at me earnestly. Can you tell me, how did you start to like me? The night was dark, but I could see the hope in his eyes. Once, you came back drunk, kicked the scarf I was knitting for the puppy. It was in the middle of the night. You sat cross-legged on the floor, figuring out how to knit a scarf for it. I told you to go to sleep, and you said the puppy would be cold without a scarf in the winter, so I thought, maybe someone who cares about whether a puppy is cold wouldn't be so heartless to harm others. There was something else I hadn't told him. Samuel talked in his sleep that night, saying, "Minnie, I'm cold too." My heart softened a bit. I felt sorry for him, all alone, unloved. Samuel listened intently and asked, "Are we going to have a pet dog at home?" 7 years later on my birthday, you gave me one. You said you were too busy, never home, and wanted it to keep me company. I happily counted on my fingers and calculated that the dog must still be waiting to be reincarnated. Our dog was very intelligent, learning things easily. That made me suspicious. I paused mid-sentence. Samuel looked puzzled. What's wrong? I grabbed his hand. David, he's just like me. What do you mean? I turned my head, brows furrowing deeper, and when David jumped from the rooftop, he told me, "It's been years since you last sang me happy birthday, but I did celebrate his birthday last year." Samuel squinted his eyes, and it suddenly dawned on him. So you're saying you've had multiple lifetimes? Yes, my blood rushed to my head, sending shivers down my spine, as he described it. He had been waiting for a birthday song from me for many years, and this was the only explanation. Samuel and I glanced at each other, each seeing the bewilderment reflected in the other's eyes. Let's go to the hospital. Half an hour later, the doctor told us that someone had taken David away. When we asked further, they refused to disclose any patient information. It was hard to believe David had nothing to do with the incident. On our way back, I kept pondering a question. Do you think he jumped intentionally? Samuel gripped the steering wheel, tapping his fingertips on the leather cover lightly. Usually, in low-rise areas, the police would set up an air cushion. If it were me, I'd be 100% sure to jump without getting seriously injured. I stared at his profile thoughtfully. What do you think his mindset was? He let out a sigh, perhaps to gain your sympathy, so you would lean towards him. This was the first time Samuel had uttered such jealous words in all our years together. I bit my lip, nodding solemnly. Ah, you really understand, huh? He dryly retorted, "Men understand men the best." I didn't expose his facade, but gazed outside, lost in thought. 10 years in advance, warning Samuel of who to guard against might not make things worse. The image of him rushing into a blazing building to save me in my past life flashed in my mind, my heart aching. How could I not be moved? Kindness is visible. After a few hours of back and forth on the road, we arrived home late at night. The housekeeper had already left, and the living room was dark. As Samuel reached out to turn on the light, I pounced on him, pushing him onto the sofa. His long legs were forced to straddle both sides, supporting my weight. Samuel's clothes were disheveled, and he hoarsely asked, "What do you want?" "Samuel," I whispered to his ear, "I love you." His breath became erratic in an instant. His Adam's apple bobbed, his hand gripping my waist to prevent me from falling off him. "No, not now," he commanded almost desperately. I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Don't you want to?" Covering my eyes, he replied with cold detachment, "No, don't look." Darkness enveloped me as my eyelids fluttered, his warm hand brushing over my lashes. I never expected my "I love you" to have such an impact. Throwing him off balance, I smirked, teasingly repeating, "I love you," like feathers tickling his heart, setting ablaze his emotions. I leaned against his chest, feeling his heart rate quickening beneath my palms. Softening my tone, I said, "Samuel, I love you." The next moment, he silenced me. With a kiss, uncharacteristically forceful, he cornered me, overwhelming me with his love that I couldn't resist. His hands caressed me like treasured jewels, tracing my jawline, neck, gently supporting. "Listen," he sighed, "aren't you hungry?" "Yes, I am." I clung to him like a koala, hands slipping under his shirt. "Hungry, let's eat." Seeing his persistent disinterest, I boldly continued, "Have you thought of a nickname for the baby?" Samuel's eyes darkened slightly, lifting me in his arms, walking past the dining table straight to the bedroom. The aroma of roasted chicken legs grabbed my attention. Peeking at the dining table, my eyes lit up. "Wait a moment, the housekeeper saved me a chicken leg." "No more." Samuel coldly refused me for the first time. "This is a one-time offer, and now I decide." It seemed Samuel had some negotiation skills up his sleeve. He was a shrewd businessman. His voice murmured gently in the dark, guiding me like a boat in turbulent waters. Feather-like kisses danced on my fingertips, eventually melting into my heart. "I'm yours." Ensnared by his beauty, I hummed softly, rolling on top of him, possessive. After showering, my eyelids felt sticky. Taking advantage of cuddling him, my hands roamed freely, seeking every inch of him. He was as mild as a large dog, seemingly never having a temper. "Minnie," I murmured in exhaustion, snuggling into his arms. "Do you remember the time when we planned to watch a movie just after getting married? But I fell ill the next day and went to the hospital." Did you think I was meeting him? Honestly, that seemed like a long time ago for me. Recollecting, it didn't seem related to David. The day before, Samuel had sent me a small cake, and I had eaten spicy snacks, resulting in gastroenteritis. I had to receive a drip at the hospital and take medication, returning home to rest. But based on Samuel's tone, it seemed off. My curiosity awakened. "How did you come to believe that I went to see David?" Logically, with his abilities, he could easily track my whereabouts and knew I was hospitalized, but he didn't check. After a brief silence, Samuel confessed candidly, "I can see David's Instagram, but David never liked to use Instagram, right?" We locked eyes, both harboring doubt. Samuel pulled out his phone and handed it to me. Eagerly, I opened David's profile, but as soon as I saw the content on his Instagram, my mind buzzed. "Today, Minnie said she wanted to celebrate my birthday, grateful for my loved one, tasted Minnie's homemade dishes." Just like before, I scrolled frantically, and 6 months ago, that one post, the movie's released, waiting for Minnie to come. It was the day I had gastroenteritis. Opening my phone, David's Instagram was empty. These posts were only visible to Samuel. However, since we got married, I hardly interacted with David, at most, receiving calls from the hospital for payments or therapy adjustments. I genuinely considered him an old friend, but he had repeatedly hurt my loved ones behind my back. Frustrated, I rubbed my temples. How could you believe him? There isn't even a picture of me on his account. Samuel lowered his gaze, staring at the empty Instagram feed on my phone, a glint of realization slowly appearing in his eyes. "Minnie," I'm hesitant to disbelieve, clicking on and backing out of David's profile repeatedly, as if confirming something, an unconscious action upon seeing the truth. "I fear that if I investigate and find that you were actually at the movie theater with him, I'd rather not know." Angry and torn, I implored, "You could've at least asked me." Caught off guard, I paused abruptly. Yes, he didn't dare to ask. Back then, I often snapped at him harshly. The answer he received wouldn't have been much better than his guesses. "I'm sorry." I buried my head in Samuel's chest, eyes stinging with tears. "I won't snap at you again, ever." He chuckled softly, kissing my ear. "No, don't be. I like your fiery side. It's adorable. Just don't say you don't need my care anymore." That night, the last hint of detachment between us vanished. I suspected Samuel had a slight masochistic tendency. He seemed uncomfortable without a scolding. One particular morning, I erupted once more. "Samuel, do you want to work yourself to death at the office, only for me to present you with a dedicated employee award?" On the phone, Samuel's sexy voice became husky, with a touch of nasal tone. "I can handle it. He had a high fever late last night, burning up all over. I called the family doctor, got fever reducers, and urged him to take them, half persuading, half forcing him to take the medicine. I also helped wash his body with a basin. As the sky was about to brighten, his fever subsided. I prepared a light meal according to the housekeeper's menu, intending for Samuel to eat when he woke up and then fell asleep, cuddled in his arms. Yet when he opened his eyes, it was 10 o'clock, and he had already gone to work. Perhaps due to past life shadows, I focused on his safety. After a simple breakfast, I packed the lunchbox the housekeeper made and hurried to his office. Seeing me, the secretary nervously stood up. "The boss is in a meeting and can't be disturbed." "That's okay, I'll wait." I sat on the lobby sofa, playing with my cell phone. Gradually, I overheard Samuel talking to someone. His tone was unusually cold and sharp. "I gave you a chance, but you didn't seize it. Samuel, you are clearly trying to make me make a mistake on purpose." Samuel chuckled lightly. "So what if I am You are being unreasonable. I am a business person, only interested in profit. I never bother with reason when dealing with people. I propped my chin in my hand, listening attentively, while the secretary looked terrified. The door was suddenly flung open, and an angry middle-aged man stormed out. As he left, he glanced at me accidentally, and I was stunned. This person, wasn't he the one who injured me in my past life? Could it be that Samuel has already started taking action? 10 years ahead of schedule, he really is a man of action. The secretary was sweating profusely, raising her voice. Boss, your wife is here. I snapped back to reality, picked up the lunchbox and walked inside, but I didn't see the ruthless man who ruled the workplace. Samuel was sitting by the window, his white shirt spotless, smiling gently at me. I'll be back for lunch. I placed the lunchbox on his desk, sat down opposite him, and just now, did I startle you? He chuckled softly. I'm sorry. I'll pay attention to my tone next time. No, I scratched my head. This person, the one I told you about last time, the one who injured me. A hint of ice flashed in Samuel's eyes. He simply said, just hand him over to me, and then focused on eating seriously. The timing was just right, and the lunch was still warm. He really had good manners. Even eating lunch was a sight to behold. Seeing me still staring at him, Samuel paused and asked, do you want to eat with me? No, I hesitated, leaning forward slightly. That person? Samuel paused again, sighed. Do you want to buy a bag? Or some clothes? You can use the card I gave you, or wait for me to finish work and accompany you. I bit my lip, feeling my ears turn red. Could you, please, talk to me in the same tone as earlier? What? I covered my face, almost shrinking under the table. Please, I really fall for that. Samuel swallowed his food and suddenly smiled. I blushed and kicked him shyly. Don't laugh at me. Forget what I said. I won't forget. He stared at me. I can never refuse any of your requests. That day, people at their company saw me blushing like an apple, rushing out of the company, entangled in past lives and present lives for so many years. Only recently did it feel like a warm love. I took over Samuel's Instagram account, posting failed kitchen creations every now and then. Blurry couple photos taken on a whim, with captions laced with sarcasm. Samuel gently remarked, actually, I still have friends. In other words, it was a bit embarrassing, but as he saw me having fun, he accepted the teasing from everyone. Every Instagram post had a few comments that had become common. Here comes the wife picture again. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was deep autumn. David seemed to have disappeared from my life. His phone number was deactivated, cutting off all contact, sometimes. When I saw high school students leaving school, I would still think back to the past, but my intuition told me that things wouldn't end so simply. Samuel became very busy, leaving early and returning late. Sometimes, when I waited for him at home, I would think of the past. He was also like this, always busy, with little time to talk to me. Madam, it's 10 o'clock, you should go to bed early. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by newly bought things. Just a little longer, I realized I hadn't seen him face to face for a week. Tonight, I suddenly wanted to wait for him. As the weather turned colder, I went to the mall and bought Samuel a set of winter clothes, camel plaid scarf, wool coat, and matching couple gloves that were a bit childish, similar to mine. As I was putting the clothes away in the closet, I suddenly heard a vibration from his coat. I took it out and saw an email. I took a picture and sent him a message mockingly. Samuel, how come you have a phone that nobody knows about? He was already used to my occasional silly jokes and replied, it's for work. I forgot to bring it. Could you open it and see? I opened the email and muttered, I hope it's not a love letter from someone else, or I'll be upset. The interface changed, showing a medical report. I squinted and looked closely. Bob, skull fracture and intracranial hemorrhage. It seems like he was hit by something. There's a death report below, an accident at work. It's really unfortunate. After listening, Samuel said gently, okay, put the phone back. I'll buy you a small cake when I come back home. Just now you said I could look freely, miser. He chuckled. There's really nothing interesting to see. I reheated the food for him in the kitchen and put the phone back. Then I took out the wrapping paper, intending to wrap the new clothes as a gift to surprise him. My best friend Vivian teased me over the phone. You used to annoy people to death. Minnie, have you changed your ways? Samuel is the best in our family. Weren't you blind back then? Okay. When are you going to start a studio with me in partnership? Do you know how hard it is to get your design drafts? I hesitated, saying, let's wait a bit longer. I can provide you with design drafts at home. Just be with your Samuel. I admit, I wanted to spend more time with him. If there were no changes, we would eventually move towards death together, day by day less. Samuel came home on time. I left a small lamp lit in the living room. With the clay pot still warm, I curled up in the corner of the sofa, holding my breath. Samuel called out softly, Minnie. I didn't speak, slinking behind him and suddenly jumping onto his shoulders. Samuel, carrying me, held me tightly, making sure I didn't fall off. Why aren't you scared? I saw your shadow, helplessly clinging to him. I whispered, "Go to the bedroom, I have a gift for you." As he took me to the bedroom, a misshapen giant gift box sat in the center. "What's this?" "It's your belated birthday gift. It's not even handmade by me this year. I'm really not satisfied. All this money, I earned it by working hard on drafting designs." I slipped off his back, presenting the gift to him. "Open it and see." Samuel lowered his eyes, hesitating for a while. "There's something I want to discuss with you." "Say it." He struggled to speak, then finally said, "Maybe we need to separate for a while." I was stunned for a few moments, thinking I hadn't woken up yet, but when it sank in, I slowly, word by word, asked, "Do you want a divorce from me?" Struggling to control his emotions, Samuel started to speak, but I abruptly stood up. "I understand. I'll go pack my things, Minnie." Samuel grabbed me, patiently listening to me. "Please, listen to me." I was on the verge of tears, not turning around, afraid to cry and embarrass myself. "Just say it like this. Actually, even if you don't, I know it. I have hurt you, and you were only with me to retaliate. I shouldn't have insulted you by calling you a disgusting little ghost when we got married, or made you wait outside the movie theater for 2 hours. I shouldn't have known you like cleanliness and secretly spread jam on your white shirt. It serves me right." The person behind me suddenly fell silent. "You spread jam where?" "On the shirt and the bedsheet." "When was this?" "Just not long after we got married. I wanted to take revenge on you." The room suddenly turned silent, and the next moment, I found myself sprawled across Samuel's lap, a sharp slap landing on my lower back, tingling and numbing. With tears in my eyes, I plaintively cried out, "I didn't know I would be abused before you mentioned a divorce. Help, I didn't even use much force." Samuel laughed. "Minnie, are you being childish?" I struggled hard, unwilling to show weakness. "According to the principles of success, you have to hit your opponent's weakest point directly, and you like cleanliness, right? I'll dirty your bedsheets. We're getting divorced and I'll make a mess again." Another slap landed. My face burned bright red. "Samuel, you're humiliating me. Give me a clean break." "A clean break?" "Afraid you can't handle it." He lifted me up, consolidating my struggles, and holding back my resistance, with a serious expression. "Okay, stop crying. I need to talk to you seriously. You have to act with me." "What play?" "Bob is David's dad." Samuel got straight to the point. "The email you saw just now was about his dad's death in a workplace accident. That project, many years ago, was a collaboration between your uncle and my dad." I suddenly recalled the day when I went to the rooftop to find David. He stood there, his white shirt billowing in the wind like a raised white sail, holding an ice cream stick. I called out, "David, what are you doing up there?" He turned back, despair written all over his clean face. "My family is dead. I have no family left." I was shocked by the situation in his family, carefully approached and handed him an ice cream stick, saying, "I have no family either. How about me? You? Look, this is from when they locked me in the girls' bathroom and hit me," he solemnly said, taking the ice cream stick. "My uncle only scolds me for causing trouble for him. He doesn't care about me." David looked at my bruised arms, took the ice cream stick, and jumped down from the edge, asking, "What's your uncle's name?" "Jack." David raised his head slowly. "Jack?" "The Jack from the Sangs group?" He looked at me with an unprecedented serious look and said, "Don't worry, I'll treat you well in the future." Lost in memories, it took me many years to suddenly understand the meaning of that look. Perhaps, in the moment before he learned his uncle's name, David truly wanted to treat me as family, but my relationship with the Smiths could help him open the door to revenge. He spent many years teaching me that family would never betray you, and if family was harmed, it must be paid back 1,000 times over. But initially, his promise was woven from lies. Samuel said, "Minnie, I can see that David likes you. You said in your past life, you were killed by someone, and with David's help, perhaps it's because you chose me. I can't let you continue being tied to me, to gamble on. You have no connection with the Smiths. David should be aware of that. So, as long as you leave me, all the future dangers will be on me alone." I stubbornly held his hand and said, "I'm not leaving. You know what? In our past life, we even had children, and I didn't get a chance to tell you." Samuel paused. "Really?" "Well, maybe we have them now." He stiffened, staring blankly at my stomach. "Samuel, I can act with you, but I cannot divorce." A few weeks later, the media broke the news. Renowned businessman Samuel suspected of divorcing, and the photo of me moving out of the villa was posted online by netizens on the same day. My best friend Vivian watched me moving stuff into her apartment, thrilled. "You finally realized and want to start a business with me?" I had a cold expression. "Men are unreliable. Just a few days ago he was Samuel. What happened between you two?" She asked with a gossipy look, irritated by her curiosity. I sighed. "I smeared jam on his bedsheets." "Just that?" "Just that, and we got divorced." "What are your plans for the future?" Live on my own. On the third day, I received a call from my uncle, Minnie, come back tomorrow. I held the phone and watered the lilies, laughing, Uncle, why did you suddenly remember me? He replied, you're divorced, and family can't watch you suffer outside. Come back for the banquet. I'll help you find someone. After hanging up, my friend looked at me worryingly. You have cut ties with your parents long ago. What does their family matter have to do with you? I shrugged. They always want to harm me. In the evening, dressed in a black fishtail dress, I pushed open the doors of the Smiths' mansion. The banquet hall was bustling with people. As soon as I entered, all eyes turned towards me, and people began to whisper, is this the Miss Smiths? She doesn't have much presence, with no parents to rely on. Who do you expect to take care of you? Should we let your son try to climb the Smith's high branch and skip struggling for a dozen years? Walking through the crowd, I heard a familiar voice at a turn, long time no see. I looked over and saw Samuel holding a glass, standing amidst the crowd. He was as radiant as ever. Upon hearing about his divorce, many bosses flocked to him, and the female companions surrounded him like layers of protection. You must be delighted. People noticed me, and the chatter fell silent. Samuel, how about catching up first? Samuel glanced at me coldly, retracting his gaze. No need. We have nothing left between us. I casually picked up champagne from a servant's tray and walked over. The passing pedestrians automatically gave way, afraid we might start a fight. Samuel's deep gaze fell on my moist lips, lingering briefly before traveling down my neck, capturing my elegant waistline. For a moment, he forgot his lines, unable to wait. I splashed the champagne on his clothes and joked, just saying hello, hope you don't mind. He took my empty glass, delicately brushing my hand with his fingertips, and smiled faintly. I don't mind. Displeased, I hummed and tossed the glass aside, pushing open the doors to the terrace to catch some fresh air. Little did I know, someone was already on the terrace. It was someone I knew, David, leaning against the railing, his burned face hidden in the darkness, only half of his handsome face visible. Minnie, long time no see. My eyelashes fluttered slightly, and I tightened the hand hidden behind my back. Long time no see, he chuckled and said, why do we seem estranged? I tried to ease my nervous tension, taking a deep breath. So why did you think I disappeared? Where have you been? Blocking me on your phone. Can't handle me anymore, huh? I pushed him as I used to do. Suddenly, the light from outside was obscured by someone. Glancing over, I saw Samuel leaning casually against the window, watching us. David was completely pushed into the shadows. I had surgery. Surgery? He leaned forward slightly, and the dim light illuminated his face. The burned skin had nearly healed. Do I look the same as before? I stared blankly at him, and after a while, said, the same. So, what about us? I took a step back, creating some distance. I'm happy for you, really. The door suddenly swung open, and my uncle led a group of guests over. Come, let me introduce you, my niece, Minnie, and this new actor in our company, David. They've known each other since they were young. In fact, I organized this banquet to help the two of them resolve a major life decision. The surrounding guests showered us with compliments. I frowned. Uncle, I'm not ready for this. David put his arm around my shoulder, saying with a smile, Uncle, rest assured, I will take good care of Minnie from now on. I struggled a bit, realizing he had a strong grip, feeling a bit panicked. Thankfully, he let me go after a brief moment, smoothly engaging in conversations with the guests. My emotions were complicated. After David finished chatting, I asked, when did you get involved with my uncle? David casually adjusted his bow tie. I can only marry you with the Smiths' approval. I had other plans, but with your divorce, it saved me a lot of trouble. Looking at his face, I felt he was terrifyingly unfamiliar. David smiled. Why? Don't recognize me? Do you feel that I'm not quite the same as the David in your heart? In the past, I thought David's smile was bright and sunny, like we were from the same world, but now, it seemed I was wrong. He stepped closer, pushing me back step by step. Finally, my back was against the glass door. Minnie, this is who I am. He forced a smile. Under the dim light, it appeared somewhat grim. Originally, we shouldn't have let this go, but I love you. As long as you come back, we can be like before. You wouldn't want to die with Samuel like in the past, right? I shuddered, suddenly gripped by intense fear. He knows everything? David clearly sensed my dilated pupils and heavy breathing due to fear. Bending over me, he gently pressed the door handle behind me, opening the door. The cheerful violin music from the banquet floated in. The light instantly became dazzling. David smiled, mouthing to me, go back, enjoy the banquet. We'll see each other another day. It was only when I walked into the crowd that I realized I was covered in cold sweat. The brilliant and dazzling lights made me dizzy. I leaned against the stairs, following my memory, and ascended to the second floor. At the end of the corridor was the room I once lived in, and I felt like going in to rest. But as soon as I pushed open the door, someone covered my mouth. dragged me behind the door. The familiar fragrance hit me. Samuel's deep voice whispered, tinged with a hint of alcohol, "Where did he touch you?" I lost my strength, softening into Samuel's arms. Tremors ran lightly through my body, shoulder. In an instant, a hot kiss landed on my shoulder. Intertwined sensuality followed. Samuel remained silent, patiently and thoroughly kissing away the previous touch, replacing it with his mark, finally reaching my lips, nibbling gently. The shock and tension, in the end, faded away under his comfort. Standing in the darkness, I kissed him. After a long while, blushing, I asked softly, "Are you jealous?" Samuel's tone was heavy. "No one is allowed to touch you, no one." I pushed him away. "I have to go back downstairs soon, with tooth marks on my shoulder. What will people say?" Seeing Samuel frown, apparently unconvinced, I said, "They will say, I just got divorced and seamlessly hooked up with David. Do you want to listen to such idle gossip?" After a moment of silence, Samuel answered, "No, I don't want to, so tone it down a bit." Resting my head against his heart, I heard his strong and powerful heartbeat, and said, "David has allied with my uncle. Even guessed my situation and is prepared for your actions. Are you confident, Minnie, if the Smiths suffer a heavy blow? Because of this, what will you do?" I realized he was worried about that. Holding onto Samuel's large hand, I recounted, "My parents had a business marriage. They loathed each other, and when I was born, they threw me to my uncle, moving overseas away from each other. My uncle treated me as a tool to consolidate the family's power, and if it wasn't for you, I might have married a 70-year-old man by now. So, don't worry about me." Hooking his ring finger, I saw that he had put the wedding ring back on, and it warmed my heart. If the Smiths do collapse, then it's my uncle's wrongdoing. And he deserves it. In the following months, I returned to the life of a working person. After all, since becoming an adult, I haven't received a penny from the Smiths and have relied on my own hard work and thrift to support myself, developing a skill to make a living. Apart from being forced by my uncle to go back and arrange a blind date with David, my life was relatively peaceful. Vivian was extremely unhappy about this. "You've already cut off ties with him. Why do you still obey his orders?" I didn't explain. David knew my situation, and as long as I didn't comply with his wishes, he would instigate my uncle to create obstacles for Samuel. Before Samuel takes them down, I need to keep things stable. David even left the choice of the date location to me, and I chose a busy area in broad daylight, which was relatively safe. Vivian liked watching TV. Recently, Samuel often appeared on the financial channel. Every time she saw him, she would curse, "What a despicable man, Minnie, your second husband must be approved by me before I let you wear a wedding dress." She held the remote control, like someone with Parkinson's, pointing at Samuel's handsome face and said, "Men like this, you can tell at a glance that they're no good. If I let you wear a wedding dress, I might as well stay single for the rest of my life." I crawled out of a pile of design drafts and hesitantly said, "Please don't say that. At least leave yourself a way out." "Fine." Due to Vivian's strong resistance, I had to meet Samuel in secret. It was deep winter, just after a heavy snowfall. I was wearing a thick sweater and carrying a trash bag as I emerged from the hallway. Samuel's car was parked downstairs. It was a cold day, yet he was standing outside the car waiting for me. He was wearing the wool coat I had bought for him, and also had on the scarf I bought. "Come," he waved at me. I ran over joyfully, jumping into his arms and gestured for silence. "Keep your voice down. Let's go to the car. What's wrong?" "My friend, now considering you a complete scoundrel." I hurriedly pulled him into the car. The car's lights went out, casting a shadow over the white snow around us. Wrapped in a thick down jacket, I hesitated for a moment, then took out a pair of wool gloves from my pocket. "These are for you." Samuel smiled, taking the gift from me seriously. "Honey, I already have plenty of pairs. You don't like them?" I reached out to grab them, but he quickly pulled them away. "Thank you, I really like them." We didn't have much in common to talk about, but there were endless words between us. I lazily leaned on his shoulder, rubbing against him, and said, "My friend said if a second marriage is with someone like you, she what?" I didn't have the heart to speak, so I brushed it off, but I knew something bad was about to happen. I sighed. "I can already imagine her hitting me when she finds out." Samuel laughed and took my hand. "Tell you what, would you consider choosing someone else?" "Samuel!" I pushed him lightly. "What are you talking about?" He lowered his eyes and silently held my hand in his. His fingers were long and perfect, big enough to envelop both of my hands. "I want to be with you," I sulked, my spirits drooping suddenly. "I've been having nightmares lately, each one ending with Samuel telling me to live well alone. I wake up crying every time, Minnie. I mean, if one day I suddenly leave you." Before he could finish speaking, my tears fell on the back of his hand, interrupting him. There was a sigh from above, and Samuel hugged me, patting my head gently. "I was just illustrating. Even the thought is terrifying. I'm a person who has never received love from my parents since I was a child, so I tend to like whoever is kind to me. David was the same at first, but it was different later. Liking someone brings happiness, but also heartache. My feelings for you go beyond that. I want to make you happy, and when I see others have something, I want you to have it too. I care about what I say, afraid of making you unhappy. My emotions seem to be tied to you. So if you mention parting, it hurts me a lot. Samuel kissed my hair and sighed. Minnie, you love me, so why don't we stay together? I replied, you said you wouldn't refuse my requests. He answered reassuringly, patting my back, all right, we won't part. The next morning, I came out of the bedroom with swollen eyes. Vivian, chewing on a pork patty, asked, were you crying last night? Get me a popsicle, please. She got up to fetch water, taking out a pack of ice from the lower shelf of the fridge and pressing it against my eyelids. I saw you getting into a luxury car last night. I applied the ice without saying a word. She raised an eyebrow. Did you let your old lover humiliate you? Crying in bed every day, looking at your pitiful state. It's not like that. He's actually decent. Stop. She shook her head. Don't you dare say anything good about him in front of me, or I'll kick you out. I stopped struggling. She handed me a glass of water, patting my back. Dear me, what's wrong with you? Please don't scare me. Should I call an ambulance for you? I grabbed her arm. Don't. Do you even know how terrible your complexion looks? I held on to her and said, I'm pregnant. She suddenly stopped. What? A few minutes later, she dragged me into a taxi. David called me. Minnie, where are you going? It occurred to me that I had a date with him today. Sorry, I have an emergency. Where are you? I'll send you the address. Vivian knew I didn't like him, so she snatched the phone and turned it off. It's a big deal, keeping it a secret. Don't tell your relatives. I'm afraid the Smiths might find out. She sulked and didn't want to talk to me, but later she asked, are you really going to keep the baby? Yes, I'll keep it. You have it, and I'll be the aunt to your child. Women can handle half the sky. They can raise a child on their own. The radio was playing news in the taxi. We listened quietly for a while, lost in thought. The Smiths were in trouble. It was reported this morning, involving a severe workplace safety incident that happened a long time ago. Samuel's company was implicated as a former partner and was also affected. My friend held my hand anxiously, looking at me. I shook my head. It's nothing. I didn't expect Samuel to move so quickly, with the other scandals accompanying the Smiths being revealed one after another, like straw piled on a camel's back, waiting for the final straw to make the camel collapse. Thinking back to my past life, where my uncle, as the mastermind, instigated the factory explosion, I had been anxious for a long time, but now I was gradually letting go. This time, it was 10 years early. Samuel's business empire was at its peak, and my uncle's influence hadn't grown to a terrifying extent yet, so hopefully such a disaster wouldn't happen again, right? There weren't many cars on the road today, and the driver was driving steadily. As we crossed half the journey, my eyelids grew heavy. Deciding to rest briefly on Vivian's shoulder, she would wake me up when we arrived. Before I could hear her response, I slipped into unconsciousness. For a while, a voice seemed to come from a distant place. Minnie, wake up. The harsh sound of metal scraping against something woke me up from my slumber. I felt heavy in my limbs. Slowly opening my eyes, I saw cement pipes and Vivian leaning against them. The wind blew, carrying the pungent smell of industrial oil and sand. I climbed up from the ground in a daze. Vivian futilely kicked her legs as a creaking sound came from her bindings. Hurry, untie me, realizing that we were in a strange place. Both tied up, I quickly walked over and knelt down to inspect the rough hemp rope binding her. Memories flooded back, and I suddenly looked around, cold sweat running down my back. Wasn't this the abandoned factory where I met my tragic end in my past life? The ropes were tied in a dead knot, impossible to undo, only to wear down. The squeaking noise of the metal bars echoed throughout the building. Vivian cursed, kidnapping me. They clearly don't want to live. After struggling for a while, the ropes didn't seem to be loosening. She slumped against the concrete slab, saying, Minnie, stop struggling. They tied me up, not you. Which means they're targeting my family. While no one's around, you should run and call the police. I smiled bitterly. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid this time I've dragged you into this. What do you mean? Before she could finish her sentence, David's voice suddenly came from behind us. Your friend is quite noisy. Vivian peered to see, so I quickly covered her eyes and faced David. She knows nothing. Let her go. Vivian couldn't hold back. I told you clearly, if you dare to kidnap me, my father will know, and you won't get away with it. After hearing this, David's face darkened. I said, you heard us. Our business doesn't need to involve her. With Vivian's political background and her police officer brother, she had always been fearless. If anything happened to her, no one would survive. David tossed me a utility knife. Cut the ropes, and don't you move. Anyone who does will not leave here alive. I hastily picked it up and released Vivian from her bindings. Don't look at anything. Go home. Vivian frowned, whispering, could this be a trap? I whispered back, "Go ahead and call the cops if you want. I just have a feeling that these people are at the end of their road. They're not afraid of the police anymore." Remembering the explosion from my past life, I gave my friend a push. "If one of us can escape, it's one less casualty." She grabbed my shoulder. "Minnie, wait for me. I'll make sure the police come to rescue you." After she finished speaking, she stormed out without looking back. It was just me and David in the empty room. I stood up, meeting David's dark eyes. "What are you planning?" I asked. "Why did you go to the hospital?" He retorted, "Stomach ache, need medicine." I replied. David smirked and grabbed me, dragging me to the window. He held my chin and forced me to look down. "Let's see who's here." Downstairs, a man was being held at gunpoint by Uncle. I immediately recognized Samuel, and my heart skipped a beat. David chuckled. "When the police arrive, they will find Samuel's body. Even your uncle won't be able to escape." My heart was racing, fingertips cold and trembling slightly, but showing too much concern for him at this moment would only be more dangerous. I closed my eyes. "We are divorced. Whatever happens to him, it's none of my concern. Is that so?" David coldly looked down at the scene below and said, "Uncle, shoot his leg." A gunshot echoed through the room. Blood oozed from Samuel's thigh as he knelt down, looking pale as he glanced in our direction. "David, I'm here. Let her go," I pleaded. Ignoring me, David said to me, "Minnie, are you happy?" I felt a chill run through me, unable to say a word. "Uncle," the second one. I suddenly grabbed his hand, trembling. "Please, don't do it." David's smile disappeared abruptly, his fingers turning white from gripping tightly. Samuel's eyes were dark, sweat beading on his forehead. "Don't scare her," he said softly, looking at David with a pale face. David's eyes were cold and menacing as he provocatively stared at Samuel. The next moment, he lifted my chin and kissed me forcefully, his cracked lips. The fierce strength made me nauseous, and I struggled involuntarily. "Do you want him to die?" he asked as I froze in place. David firmly pressed his lips against mine, grinding against me. Feeling sick, I pushed him away, knelt on the ground, and vomited violently. "Act," David ordered coldly. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out downstairs, leaving my mind blank. I crawled to the window, fearing the worst for Samuel, but to my surprise, it was Uncle who was shot in the back, lying on the ground. Samuel's left hand was bleeding, a haunting sight, from the moment he climbed to the second floor. His eyes had been fixed on me, as if fearing something bad might happen. David pulled me back a few steps, hiding behind a concrete pillar on the second floor. Outside, the police were shouting at David. He didn't expect the police to arrive so quickly. David held me, hiding in a blind spot where the sniper couldn't see, and shouted, "I have explosives in my hand. Get Samuel to come see me, otherwise, I'll take her with me." Struggling to breathe, I could feel the world spinning around me. "David, calm down," I said weakly. "I was calm in my past life when you chose to die with Samuel. Why can't I do the same?" I desperately tried to push his hands away. "You think he can defeat me? No matter how well he protects you, what's the use? Even if you don't come out, I can still break in and take you away. I've been waiting for this day for so long. Today, either he dies, or you die." Samuel seemed oblivious to our whispered conversation. "Put the knife away from her, and I'll wear it," he said calmly. I stood there, scared to take another step. I'm not afraid of death. But choosing Samuel at this moment would only escalate David's emotions. It might even trigger the bomb prematurely. "Minnie, admit it. You only love yourself. You're as selfish and heartless as your uncle," David sneered, making snide remarks. Samuel retreated to the window, giving me a meaningful glance before speaking. "David, I'm sorry about your father. Don't you dare mention my father. He violated the rules back then. Didn't wear a helmet, and we compensated accordingly." David was angered by Samuel's mention of his father's actions, taking a step forward. "You rich kids born with a silver spoon, do you have any sincerity? But your father indeed broke the rules back then, didn't wear a helmet, and we gave the appropriate compensation." "Shut up," Samuel said coldly, mocking David. "You're just another ineffective person." I shook uncontrollably. This world has gone mad. Every word Samuel said seemed to hit a nerve in David. Was he suicidal? David seemed to grab a lighter from nowhere and tossed it to the ground, igniting a blaze instantly. The oily smell in the air was from David pouring it earlier. "You've ruined my life." With eyes reddened, David walked towards me, his partially healed face now looking terrifying in the flames. "Minnie, why didn't you choose me? If only you had told me that you didn't like deformities, I wouldn't have harmed myself so severely." A bucket of cold water splashed over him. "It was really him. You're crazy," he said. "Without doing this, how could I have used your guilt to gather information about Samuel after years of hiding it?" David finally revealed his paranoid and crazed side. His laughter, like a broken bellows, was harsh and unbearable. "Minnie, if you had chosen me, it wouldn't have ended like this. It's your own fault for coming this far. Come with me to hell." He pulled out a remote control. Without thinking, I turned and threw myself onto Samuel, hugging him tightly. "Minnie, Samuel yelled angrily, but the next moment, it exploded. The shattering of glass drowned out all other sounds. My ears were ringing, and the sharp noise felt like needles piercing my brain. I could see Samuel's colorless face, trying to say something to me. I felt like I had been reduced to a pile of fragments, numb and weak, yet I didn't fear dying with him, or did I? Then why was I crying? The deafness was temporary, and the next moment, the deafening sounds of sirens and shouting poured into my ears like an atomic bomb. Suspect has been neutralized. Body found on the second floor of the old factory. A team report confirms the explosive device is intact, and the hostage is safe. No other suspicious explosives were found at the scene. The fire is spreading rapidly. Notify all personnel to evacuate with the hostage as soon as possible. I was being escorted away, and as I looked back, I saw David lying on the ground, dead. A hand covered my eyes. The cold air dispersed the smell of smoke in my nostrils. The blaring sirens and flashing red and blue lights reflected the setting sun. My legs buckled, and I knelt in the snow, trembling. Vivian's scolding voice now sounded like music. In the 21st century rule of law society, they still play with explosives. Lock up all these lawless criminals, give them a life sentence or the death penalty, don't spare any of them. Brother, don't let them off. All right, go check on Minnie, we'll take care of the rest, Vivian said to someone. She spotted me kneeling in the snow and shouted, Minnie, get up. You have a child now, stop crawling on the ground. Samuel, who was assisting the police in dismantling the bomb, suddenly stiffened and turned to lock eyes with me before swiftly taking off his jacket. Without a word, he picked me up while I was still chatting with my friend and carried me towards the car, his expression devoid of emotion. What kind of person are you, not even greeting me properly? Vivian's protestations were cut off by the sound of the car door closing on Samuel and me. He shoved me into the back seat, then got in and stared at me with a dark expression. Suddenly, I felt a bit scared and shrank into the corner. Please, don't do this, I'm scared. Scared? Yet you dared to throw yourself at me. You think this is a game? After a brief silence, he launched into a harsh tirade. Samuel had never spoken to me in such a stern tone before, and tears immediately welled up in my eyes. The bomb is on me, he said fiercely, his forehead veins bulging. What if David had pressed it? What would we have done? Seeing that he was about to speak again, I closed my eyes and fell into his arms. Oh no, I had scared myself unconscious. Samuel paused, took a deep breath, his forehead veins pulsating. Suddenly, he held me tightly, and it was then that I noticed his hands were trembling. I'm sorry, my tone was uncalled for earlier. He ruffled my hair, trying to calm down. I was actually planning to jump out of the window, that way. Even if the sniper failed, the explosion wouldn't harm you. But why did you rush to hug me? I've never seen you exert so much strength before. I didn't think about it that much. I remember from TV that in bomb situations, you lie down, but I couldn't possibly hug David, could I? My words left Samuel momentarily speechless, unsure of how to respond. Thankfully, we were both still alive. Are your wounds all bandaged up? I asked. Yes, he replied. I don't believe you. Show me, Minnie. They're on my thigh, he chuckled. I rolled up his pants without hesitation. We're an old married couple. Why are you shy? Vivian's voice came through the glass, muffled and distant. Yes, my friend might be a victim of domestic abuse. Her man took her away, she spoke while opening the car door. The light poured in. I knelt on either side of Samuel's thigh, hands on his belt as I began to undo it. Vivian held up her phone, staring at us expressionlessly for 3 seconds, then suddenly closed the door. During our wedding ceremony, Vivian sat at the head table. She barely touched her food. When it came time for the toasts, Samuel spoke politely. Minnie always talked about you before. She said if I were her second spouse, something bad might happen. Under his probing gaze, she recalled her bold words back then. If you were my second spouse, she glanced at me, and I looked at her. We exchanged a wordless glance. I had just casually mentioned it, not expecting Samuel to remember it so well. Vivian smiled, raised her glass and said, it's all in the past. Here's a toast to the both of you. May you have a long and happy life together. Samuel smiled slightly. Thank you. After the toasts, I followed closely behind Samuel, muttering, why bring up the past like that? I was just curious, he said. Really curious? I hesitated for a moment, then grinned mischievously. Lean closer, I'll tell you a secret, I whispered to him as he leaned in. Samuel's eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. I laughed so hard it hurt. If she had actually done that and pulled me in, what would we have done? Mr. Serious, do you still have a face left? Laughter echoed through the hall joyfully. Samuel looked at me with warm eyes that could melt any heart. As the wedding reception ended, guests could enjoy themselves at the seaside resort. In the evening, I removed my wedding dress and put on loose clothes. Wearing a wide-brimmed hat to shield from the sun, holding Samuel's hand, we joyfully walked along the sandy beach. You always said you'd accompany me to the seaside, yet you never came before. When you say before, you mean? I teased. Oh, you mean the 38-year-old you? Samuel furrowed his brow, feeling a bit old. No, you're not old. I playfully pouted. 38-year-old you is still handsome, even more alluring with a touch of silence. The 38-year-old Samuel had gained a sense of composure that made him undeniably attractive. Lost in thought, he seemed distracted as we conversed. By nightfall, as I entered the bedroom, I was suddenly seized. A dangerous aura emanated from behind, the warmth of a chest pressing against me causing a shiver. I was being held captive. In a seductive tone, Samuel questioned, "Do you think that old man understands you like I do?" I was taken aback, realizing why he had been off all day. He was jealous. I burst into laughter. "Hey, you." Samuel grasped my chin, staring into the mirror with eyes that seemed to have a hidden hook. "Are you influencing me?" He lightly teased. "That's beyond his capabilities. Are you defending him?" His tone clearly showed his jealousy. "No, I'm not," I replied, feeling helpless. "Do you really want to prove yourself capable of this even 10 years later?" Samuel paused, then solemnly said, "In principle, maybe." Refusing to engage in our dispute, he observed my reflection in the mirror emotionlessly, expressing a desire for that old man to see. I covered my face in embarrassment, murmuring, "Let's not talk about it." Samuel silenced me with a kiss, passionately stating, "Minnie, you are mine." That night, perhaps it was the peak of my emotional intelligence in a lifetime, I had to admit that he was more impressive than the 38-year-old man, yet he continued to reassure me of his past allure. As the night grew late, moonlight filtered through the window, casting a glow on his profile. Samuel had fallen asleep. I gently touched his face, feeling a warmth in my heart. I had often, over the years, held hands with the 38-year-old Samuel, wishing we had been together earlier, but for 10 long years, we had been two agonized strangers. During those 10 years, I must have also felt something stir within me. In the late night, when he quietly covered me with a blanket, there were moments when I wanted to hold him tight and say, "Let's reconcile," but David's accident had become a thorn in my heart. Those feelings I hesitated to acknowledge would resurface, reminding me that Samuel had hurt my loved ones. Perhaps after being suppressed for so long, when misunderstanding cleared, a rush of love emerged, taking us through a brief yet romantic period of infatuation. I found myself liking him more than I had realized. "Minnie, why are you awake?" Samuel's voice, tinged with hoarseness from sleep, met my ears. Cupping his face, I leaned in and placed a very light kiss on his lips. "I love you." Beneath my palms, Samuel's heart began to beat wildly once again. This man just couldn't help but be alluring. "I love you too," he said, pulling me into a deep and irresistible kiss. His sudden passion left me defenseless. "What's gotten into you?" I asked. "I just had a dream," Samuel said, opening his eyes, emotions swirling within them like an impending storm about to break. "I dreamed of our past lives," he confessed. I held my breath. "Really?" Brushing aside my disheveled hair, he looked at me as if I were a treasure, saying, "Minnie, I'm grateful we have a chance to start anew." The night was still young, moonlight shy, the breeze lingering, the warm fragrance hung in the air, the fluttering window curtains colliding with the sound of wind chimes. It was the heartbeat echoing continuously. I became a gentle sea, embracing him, softly whispering, "Since when did you start liking me? Are we getting married?" He replied, "No. I've liked you for a long, long time." Epilogue. "Boss, it's your birthday today. Aren't you going home?" The secretary peeked into the office, adorned and carrying her bag. She seemed ready for a date with her boyfriend. Hesitant to leave before the boss did, Samuel emerged from the sea of documents, but his thoughts were elsewhere as he realized the one phrase he had been waiting for hadn't come. Glancing at the cold boxed meal on his desk, he felt a sense of weariness and made a call home. Just a few hours earlier, he had told the nanny that he wouldn't be coming home that night. With the cooling weather, he didn't want Minnie to fret and run out due to him. "Mr. Samuel? Will you come back for dinner?" the nanny asked. "And where is Minnie?" She's gone out." The nanny hesitated, and then said, "Madam, she's gone." "All right, got it." He hung up. Samuel sat there, lost in thought, gazing into the empty office, opening Instagram. David's taunts arrived right on cue. Samuel, like a masochist, stared at the photos repeatedly. Minnie's hand lighting candles, presenting the cake, preparing gifts, and the blue roses. Samuel thought to himself, "I've had that too." When he thought about it, he had known Minnie longer than David had. It was just that Minnie didn't know. The first time he met her, she was just a little girl, crying in the bushes. That afternoon, after being scolded by his stepmother, Samuel sat in a rocking chair next to the bushes, soaking up the sun. The little girl poked her head out of a hole in the hedge, tearfully asking, "Big brother, did you hear me crying just now?" Looking at her tear-streaked face, Samuel pulled out a tissue. "Why were you crying?" His arms bore a large red burn patch from being scalded by his stepmother with hot water earlier He thought to himself that he was somewhat of a wild child too. After a moment of silence, he pulled out a piece of candy. "It's okay, I won't make fun of you." With candy in hand, Minnie soon forgot all about her tears. Minnie is particularly easy to coax. She knew that the older brother next door had candy, and when she felt wronged, she would sneak over. Later, she had burn ointment and plasters in her pocket. She called it a reward for Samuel. One sunny afternoon, Minnie squatted next to Samuel, watching the new wounds on his body, and asked, "Brother, why do they always beat you?" Samuel said, "Probably because they hate me." Since his mother died and his father remarried, Samuel had never had a good day. He had endured this for so long, not knowing when he would see the light. Perhaps he should have died from a beating at some point, never to wake up again. "I think you're great." Minnie sensed his emotions, hugged his leg, patted it, and said, "I like you." The strength of this sentence was as light as a feather. Looking into Minnie's clear and innocent eyes, Samuel's heart ached for a moment, as if something had come back to life inside him. He thought, if he died, would she be sad? After that, he started to resist. That place became their secret base. Minnie celebrated his birthday once. The flattened small cake, accompanied by broken candles, with fire soaked in water, not able to spark. Minnie cried in dismay, "I hate Uncle, he lied to me." But Samuel held the cake like a treasure and said, "Thank you, I really like it. There couldn't have been a better birthday gift than this." Minnie was full of guilt. She hugged Samuel, kissed him softly, and said, "Brother, happy birthday, always be happy. From now on, Minnie will buy you a big cake." Samuel remembered this sentence and constructed a beautiful scene in his mind. For him at that moment, it was like a dream that was hard to reach, sweet and beautiful. Minnie also said that the next day, she would give him a big gift and he must wait for it. That night, he was beaten again. This time his stepmother had drunk too much and lost control. Samuel lay on the ground, his vision darkening, vomiting blood. His usually indifferent father finally got angry. Samuel listened, feeling desolate. Since his mother's death, no one in this family had cared about him. His father was afraid he would die at home and cause gossip, so he arranged for him to be taken to a hospital abroad overnight. Samuel held onto his father's trouser leg and said intermittently, "Can we leave tomorrow?" He still remembered Minnie's instructions and the unfinished promise, but his pleading words fell on deaf ears. He didn't know what life would be like without his Minnie, so he made an effort. After many years of planning, he returned from abroad and took over the family business. He used all means to marry Minnie. On the day of their wedding, the girl he had yearned for was cold towards him. It was only then that Jack revealed the truth. It was all his fault, the artist that he sent for last time, the one who had an accident on the way, was Minnie's ex-boyfriend. He never thought the child would care about this incident so much. No one had ever told him. He thought that by marrying Minnie, he was saving her. In Minnie's eyes, he was a villain who used his power to force her to marry him through Uncle Sang. He was completely wrong. Minnie had someone she liked now, named David. Samuel still went to the hospital. The divorce agreement was left on the passenger seat, watching Minnie come out of the hospital. He said, unwillingly, "Today is my birthday too." The promised big cake and birthday gift from years ago. Samuel wanted to try again. As expected, Minnie avoided him at all costs. When she spoke, she didn't even want to look at him. The words "let's divorce" got stuck in his throat and he couldn't say them. Samuel found many excuses for himself, like the big cake she had promised before. She hadn't given it to him yet. Wait until she remembers and fulfills the promise. Then it would be better to let go. But as he waited and waited, he never waited for it to happen. They seemed to become strangers living under the same roof. Samuel knew she loathed him, so he rarely returned home. One day, it rained outside, and Minnie's name suddenly popped up on his phone. Samuel couldn't believe it. Feeling lost, he opened his phone. A very short message. "Are you coming home today?" His lifeless heart suddenly came alive. He hesitated for a moment, wrote yes, then deleted it, and wrote, "What's wrong?" Nothing much. After that, there was no more communication. Samuel began to regret it, to the extent that he was distracted in meetings. After work, he returned home. He hesitated after parking the car downstairs. Wait a little longer, until Minnie falls asleep, so there won't be another argument. There was music in the car. He held the steering wheel, with his wedding ring on his ring finger gleaming in the dark night. His heart felt bitter. A long time later, he pushed open the door in the night. The housekeeper heard the noise, came out, and said, "You're back." Then she gestured to him to be quiet. "Madam is asleep on the sofa." Frowning slightly, Samuel asked, "On the sofa?" He looked over. A small dark shadow curled up in a corner of the sofa. The blanket had slipped to the floor. "You're still waiting until now," the housekeeper said quietly. His heart tightened. "Why?" He asked. The housekeeper mentioned the cake on the table, but I kept it for you. Madam made it herself, planning to send it to your company tomorrow. Samuel looked at the cake with a missing piece, and a sudden warmth flowed into the cracks of his heart. It hurt, but he willingly indulged in it. Feeling the torment, Samuel knew that he could no longer bring up the divorce. Minnie's small gesture was enough to break down his walls. Then, murmurs came from the sofa. Someone moved suddenly. Samuel immediately froze, feeling exposed like a ghost under the light, nowhere to hide. When Minnie's gaze met his, she paused for a moment. The two of them looked at each other in silence. Only the housekeeper was talking. Mr. Samuel just came back and hasn't eaten yet. I see there's a cake on the table, just for you. Minnie, who had just woken up, hesitated for a moment, then grabbed the blanket and stood up from the floor. Walking barefoot through the living room, Samuel wanted to remind her to wear shoes, but he felt he had no right, so he remained silent. As Minnie passed by him, she paused for a moment and awkwardly said, "The cake is too sweet. I don't like it. You can have it." She then walked into the bedroom, closed the door with a click, and even locked it. The housekeeper was at a loss and said to Samuel, "What do you think, Mr. Samuel?" Samuel sighed silently and said, "Cut a piece for me, I'll eat it and leave." The cake was not sweet at all, just right. The rich aroma of milk clashed recklessly in his mouth. The cake was soft and just right. Although he didn't like the fruits on top, he forced himself to eat them. After eating 2 pieces, Samuel reluctantly stood up. The housekeeper quickly took out a takeaway box, packed the remaining cake, and stuffed it into his hands. Samuel wanted to refuse, but was stopped by the housekeeper. "Take it, Mr. Samuel. It's something you like. Madam will be happy." Samuel thought that maybe this kind of life was not bad. After all, he still had a home. In a way, many familiar people advised him that life could not be forced, and it was easy to find someone who was lukewarm about divorce. But Minnie still wore their wedding rings, never spent nights outside. She just couldn't get closer to him. Moreover, it was he who had caused her ex to die. It wouldn't be right for him to let her carry the label of a divorced person, so Samuel made the best of a bad situation and maintained their marriage for many years. In the 7th year, work problems started to arise. The company was in crisis. He had time to take care of Minnie before, but lately, he just felt overwhelmed. One day, after finishing a meeting, he noticed that he had missed a call from Minnie. When he called back, Minnie said, "It's okay. You're busy." Worried, he called the housekeeper. "Madam had a stomachache just now, but she has already seen a doctor and is feeling much better." Then he heard the housekeeper mumbling something about Minnie being busy with a studio with a friend, under a lot of pressure, not in a good mood. The doctor said it was stress-induced gastric ulcers and she needed to adjust her emotions. Samuel thought a lot. He could be 100% compliant with her, and he could buy her whatever she wanted, but the one thing he couldn't provide was emotional value. Minnie loathed him. Samuel asked around, and finally, his secretary suggested, "What about giving her a puppy?" He carefully selected a fluffy white puppy that resembled Minnie from her childhood. It was gentle and affectionate, lying in his arms happily wagging its tail. Samuel felt a sense of relief, thinking Minnie would like it. As expected, the housekeeper called that day. Madam played with it all afternoon, bought lots of dog food and canned food, and even tried to knit a scarf for it. "You really understand her." David's Instagram hadn't been updated for days. Samuel thought that maybe the little dog had captured Minnie's attention. Truly a good little dog. One night, he got drunk after a dinner party, and by some strange impulse, returned home, because that evening, the dining table was full of married men. During the banquet, the madam's phones never stopped ringing. While some complained, they couldn't hide their proud demeanor. Samuel thought, "Why shouldn't I be allowed to go home too?" He staggered and pushed open the door, feeling his way in the dark. In the past, when he occasionally stayed overnight at home, Samuel would lay on the couch. This time, following a familiar path, he accidentally kicked over something and heard a dog bark in an angry and aggrieved manner. The lights turned on quickly. Minnie, still half asleep in her pajamas, stood in the living room. The little dog whimpered and ran towards her as if filing a complaint. Samuel, still wearing his shoes, stepped on the carpet. With a tangled mess of yarn around his ankle, he had kicked over Minnie's handiwork. Samuel hung his head, feeling like he had done something wrong, and remained silent. It was Minnie who reacted first, furrowing her brows and shooing the dog away, then walking towards Samuel, asking why he didn't announce his return. Stepping back, Samuel replied, "I smell bad, don't come near me." He had been drinking, his speech slurred. Minnie knelt down, asking him to lift his foot and sit on the couch. Samuel obediently complied, letting Minnie take care of him. She removed the tangled yarn from his foot, her thin nightdress almost transparent, revealing her slender figure. Samuel closed his eyes and said nothing. Minnie tidied up, returned to the living room with a cup of hot water and hangover medicine. "Are you feeling any better now?" Samuel made a sound of agreement. "Thank you. I'll rest for a bit and then leave." "You don't have to," Minnie curtly replied. "I'll get you a blanket. You can sleep here. Be careful when you use the bathroom at night. Don't kick things over again." The little dog barked a couple of times menacingly. Minnie dragged it away, grumbling, "Stop barking. Daddy needs to sleep." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. He was its daddy. He had heard Minnie referring to herself as mommy to the little dog before, so... In the early hours of the morning, he sat cross-legged on the carpet knitting a neck warmer for the dog. Initially resistant, the dog eventually grew tired and lay down beside Samuel. With a good temper, he clumsily followed the tutorial, fumbling as he said, "Daddy is knitting you a neck warmer, so you won't feel cold." Minnie heard the commotion, came back out, and couldn't help but laugh at the scene before her. However, Samuel doesn't remember what happened afterwards. Due to his drunken outburst, he didn't return home for several days. The two of them silently agreed to never mention that incident again, but Minnie seemed to treat him differently after that. She started calling him once a week, asking him to take the dog for vaccinations or to play with it. Samuel was content. He thought things were fine the way they were. However, life proved to him that they could be even better. After a drunken revelation by Jack one night, with Minnie present, Samuel learned the truth. This unexpected turn of events had been orchestrated by her uncle. It happened in the 9th year of their marriage. That night, coming out of the villa, Minnie squatted by the roadside, crying. She tearfully apologized to Samuel and even mentioned divorce. Samuel helped her into the car as she cried, not sure what Minnie's intentions were. Did she really want to divorce him? If so, he felt resigned to accept it like a convict awaiting execution. He had been with Minnie for a decade, and that was enough for him. If she wanted to leave, he should let her go. He carried Minnie to the bedroom and lay on the couch, closing his eyes, waiting for the morning to come. But then he felt a soft, feather-like kiss. Opening his eyes abruptly, he saw Minnie looking startled. She tried to escape, but Samuel grabbed her. Almost pleading, his trembling voice asked, "Minnie, please explain. Don't leave like this without clarity." Minnie squirmed a bit but didn't break free, nor did she dare to turn back around. After a moment of silence, a weak and hesitant voice came out. "What if I like you? Would you hate me?" Samuel was stunned, feeling like he was dreaming again. "I wouldn't," he said. "I'd be very happy if you liked me." This was something he could only say in a dream. What followed was beyond his control. Minnie embraced him, showering him with kisses, and he complied, satisfying her every request like a faithful dog, loving her devoutly, without expecting anything in return. Minnie's hot tears, hoarse and tender voice, and the emotional intensity overwhelmed him, shattering all his rationality. He descended into a world of tenderness, his soul joyfully howling. He uttered the most audacious plea of the past decade, "Minnie, please love me." The surreal dream lasted until dawn. When Samuel regained consciousness at that moment, he fell into despair. He had dreamed once more, a dream of unattainable pain that felt like 1,000 prickles stabbing at his heart. But in the unbearable agony, a muffled muttering reached his ears. "Samuel!" The pain abruptly ceased. Opening his eyes, he saw the morning light gently illuminating Minnie's sleeping eyelashes, her forehead resting on her arm as she breathed softly. Samuel blinked in disbelief, cautiously lifting Minnie's soft hair and waking her up, which startled her. As she met his gaze, her face turned red, burying herself under the blanket swiftly. Both of their heartbeats quickened. Inside and out of the blanket, after a long moment, Minnie reached out from under the covers, hooking her pinky finger with his. Through the gap, she cautiously asked, "Should we have breakfast together?" In that year, Samuel was 38 years old. From childhood to middle age, he had waited for Minnie in lonely years. Therefore, as the flames engulfed them, Samuel refused to move another step. He didn't want to continue waiting for Minnie in a life without her. It would be too bitter. In the moment of the explosion, he held Minnie tightly, hoping that in their next life, they would be together from the start. In the afternoon, on the sun-soaked golden beach, Minnie, sporting sunglasses and holding a coconut bowl, hid under a parasol. She claimed to be sunbathing, but she was actually well covered. Her swimsuit mostly concealed her skin, except for her pert buttocks showing slightly, adorned with cute dancing ducks. She had been lying here for a while. For the past half an hour, a group of lively girls nearby had been gossiping about the men digging for shells on the beach. "He's so handsome. His body is really good. Have you seen the watch on his hand? It's expensive. I'm smitten. What do you think he likes?" Minnie unconsciously joined their conversation, mentioning, "He likes beautiful women." Everyone fell silent, surprised, and stared at the girl who had just spoken out. "What kind of beautiful women?" Minnie pondered and replied, "Fit ones? Sweet-talking ones?" The girls exchanged glances, finally looking at Minnie, urging her to go and ask him, sipping on her coconut water. Minnie set it down and boldly walked up to Samuel, saying, "Handsome." Samuel, who had been looking at shells, instantly turned his gaze to her, waiting for her to speak. Pointing to a group of beautiful women not far away, Minnie asked, "They asked me to inquire about your preferences." Samuel's eyes remained fixed on Minnie, calling her his preference. "You're so straightforward. Can I have dinner with you tonight?" He smiled. "Sure," agreed Minnie. The group nearby watched with surprise as the girl in the duck swimsuit engaged in a brief conversation with the man before being led away by him. Is it that simple? On Minnie's side, she led Samuel away from the risky setting, then peeked into a small bucket, asking, "Are there any red shells in here?" Samuel picked some up. "There are a lot." Even though it was just a passing comment, Samuel remembered, "There are many." Minnie didn't expect him to actually recall her words. She wiped the sand off Samuel's hands, dried them, and told him not to pick them up next time, thinking he liked collecting shells. "It's okay. I like it." Minnie acquiesced, squinting and teasing Samuel. "Samuel, what did I say?" Due to his good nature, she had established a rule that if he didn't like something, he had to say it, and even if she liked it, he had to refuse. Samuel paused, nodded, and said, "All right, I won't pick them up next time." Minnie lost her temper completely this time, the 6-year age gap causing Samuel to be extra tolerant of her. She wanted to do something he liked, but after observing for a while, it seemed like Samuel only liked Minnie. So she came up with a cunning plan. The sea in the evening had a unique beauty. The setting sun kissed the sea's surface gently, casting a blanket of golden scales. Minnie chose to have dinner on the private terrace. The flickering candlelight swayed in the gentle breeze. After the dishes were served, the waiters gradually left, leaving the remaining time to them. Minnie had put on light makeup and rested her chin in her hand, showing her best side from the opposite angle. Not long after, Samuel felt a dryness in his throat and took a sip of lemon water, secretly reminding himself not to be too abrupt. The person sitting across from him was just the lovely Minnie in a duck swimsuit, nothing more, but in the next moment, Minnie across from him gently took off her duck shawl. "It's so hot." Suddenly, Samuel felt like he would always be a subordinate in Minnie's matters of love. Who could have imagined that under the cute duck swimsuit, there was a bikini? As Minnie got closer, Samuel could feel the heat radiating between them. She raised a little fan and fanned him, the bells on her wrist ringing melodiously. Samuel closed his eyes, recalling how these bells had accompanied them through countless nights, sometimes lively, sometimes slow. His hand clenched tightly. Minnie hadn't eaten yet. She didn't like having an empty stomach, so she had to endure. Samuel opened his eyes, his voice hoarse. "Minnie, let's eat." Minnie blinked her innocent eyes and smiled, saying, "Yes. I'm actually quite hungry." After saying that, she took a sip of lemon water that Samuel had also drank. His mind was suddenly on edge, his rationality faltering. Taking a deep breath, Samuel took Minnie's steak and said, "Let me cut it for you." Minnie looked at the composed Samuel and inwardly gritted her teeth at how patient he was. She didn't want to ask him directly, because Samuel always obeyed her every word. After cutting the steak, Samuel placed it in front of her. Minnie didn't move, just stared at him intently. Samuel finally spoke, offering his own steak to her. "Okay. Now can we eat?" Minnie's gaze became more resentful, wondering if she was about to fail again today. She could clearly see Samuel blushing. "My back is a bit uncomfortable," Minnie said, furrowing her brows. Samuel's attention was immediately diverted. Putting down his utensils, he asked, "Where does it hurt?" Minnie took the opportunity to pull a chair to sit on Samuel's side, turning her back to him, revealing her smooth back. "It's like a sunburn." Samuel fell silent. If he didn't have Alzheimer's, he remembered Minnie had been under an umbrella all afternoon and even wore a shawl, but her pitiful tone softened him, clearing his throat. Samuel asked, "Where does it hurt?" "I don't know." Minnie started to act spoiled, murmuring, "It's a large area, you have to touch it to figure it out." Samuel suppressed any ambiguous emotions in his eyes and placed his palm on Minnie's back. The delicate hairs brushing against his palm felt like 1,000 silver threads entwining around his heart. Minnie let out a comfortable hum without saying a word for a while. Samuel's rough fingers traced the straps on her back a few times, as if truly examining her body. "Could you apply some repairing cream for me?" Minnie handed him a tube of creamy ointment, instructing him, "Apply it over a large area. Don't miss a spot, or I'll get sunburnt." Samuel chuckled helplessly, never hearing of someone getting sunburnt while under an umbrella. Still, he followed her instructions, squeezing the cream into his palm, warming it up before gently applying it on her back, as the warm breeze gently caressed them. Samuel found it increasingly hard to bear. Minnie's breath seemed to match his movements, tugging at his empty heart. It was unclear if it was the presence of the cream increasing the friction, or Minnie suddenly changing position, but at a certain moment, all restraint faded away, and so did the bikini. Falling to the ground, along with it, fell Samuel's dwindling rationality, amid Minnie's teasing exclamation. He just picked her up and carried her into the house. Minnie stifled a laugh. Pretending to be pitiful, I haven't eaten yet. Are you really so cruel as to not feed me? It's because you don't want to eat. Samuel's gaze darkened, his words becoming stiffer. You seduced me. No, I didn't. Minnie kicked him and stubbornly retorted, it's your improper thoughts, don't blame me unfairly. With a mischievous look, she raised her chin defiantly, displaying a challenging attitude. Something in Samuel snapped, fiery rage bursting out, wanting to retaliate and make her admit her fault through tears, but at the last moment, his bottom line held, reminding him to be sensible and not bully Minnie. Samuel, Minnie's voice, like a soft knife, pierced Samuel's heart. If you have nothing to do, I'll go eat now. After dinner, I've made plans to play games with someone, so I might not come back tonight. Before she could finish her sentence, she was pushed onto the bed. The soft bedding enveloped her like clouds. Minnie's eyes sparkled, a hint of redness in her eyes, drawing Samuel in, his rationality slipping away completely. With no more reservations, he kissed her. You're not going anywhere tonight, he declared. Minnie clung to his shoulders, eyes misting over, still intent on playing. I don't want to, don't want it, I want you. Finally, Minnie laughed. You're present. You can unwrap it however you want. Samuel paused, finally understanding Minnie's intentions. He sighed and said, Minnie, you're going to drive me crazy. Don't you like it? I do, very much. Minnie ran her fingers through his hair and, right before he lost his mind, she spoke the words concealed in her heart. I care about you, and you need to learn to express yourself. Maybe your requests, I can fulfill them too. At that moment, Samuel's soul surged. In a moment of greed, love surged forth. Minnie nestled softly in his arms, whispering softly like a priestess, leading Samuel into a realm of enchantment, besotted, chasing after her endlessly. In the distance, waves crashed against the shore, snow piled up, the sky was vast and the earth wide, but only in this place was his soul truly at home.